You must be able, first and foremost, to find the people based on the strength of the job that's needed. But I also believe that, on the other hand, the people that are looking for positions need to ensure that they are doing the same research and they are putting the same due diligence into their own focus and matchmaking of the organization based on their own strengths and skill sets as well.
Without supplies, there's no surgery. Without products, there's no patient care. Welcome to Power Supply, the healthcare supply chain podcast focused on helping you navigate the intricacies of logistics, purchasing, contracting, and supplier relationships. Each episode, we speak with healthcare executives, supply chain leaders, and innovative entrepreneurs from across the country as they share their stories, experience, and expertise on the industry we love. From the loading dock to strategic sourcing, from buyers to the C-suite, and across the enterprise, we tackle the real-life issues impacting the healthcare supply chain. Whether you're tuning in for conversation or inspiration, we're glad you're here. You're just in time to hear it from the source and stock up on insight. So sit back and plug into Power Supply.
On this episode of Power Supply, we speak with Brooke Elliott, founder and certified coach at B Complete Coaching and Consulting LLC. Garry, we have the pleasure of talking to a lot of entrepreneurs out there, and I think going and becoming your own boss and starting your own business can be a pretty scary endeavor, but Brooke has some background in supply chain, specifically in the group purchasing organization realm, and she's going to tell us about that. But I can't imagine going into a career like coaching as my primary source of income, because it takes a while to build up that clientele. So I think we're going to be talking to a real bold and dynamic individual today.
Absolutely, Justin. Looking forward to seeing how Brooke ties in her experience from the GPO to supply chain, and then having the courage, seriously, to go out and do her own. It takes a special person to do coaching. So I'm curious to hear what she discusses, what coaching and how it fits into those leaders that we bring into the supply chain world. So looking forward to a little different play on power supply and the supply chain world, and I hope our listeners find it useful and educated.
All right, we're going to be right back after a short break with Brooke Elliott.
I'm Hays Waldrop.
This is Garry Skinner.
And I'm Justin Poulin.
A production of 17 Studios. You're listening to Power Supply.
Joining us now is Brooke Elliott, founder and certified coach, B Complete Coaching and Consulting LLC. Brooke, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Absolutely. I appreciate you having me. I'm excited.
So, Brooke, why don't we get you to tell us a little bit about your background, and even before the coaching and consulting and being, an entrepreneur and your own boss. And tell us about your experience in, supply chain or the GPOs.
Sure. First and foremost, and I do want to say that I am a wife and a mother, and I do believe I like to be creative. And, I've learned a lot about myself over the years, and I've had some really, really great opportunities. You would never have thought that my degrees were in biology and French. I somehow ended up in the supply chain sourcing world, negotiating contracts for about half of my career. But what a fantastic challenge and experience. I learned a lot in that process. It was always a learning experience for me. And half of my career, I would say, was focused on, supporting hospitals across the nation. And the other half focused on supporting others, and really learned through that transition that I became most fulfilled in helping others succeed and work towards their goals versus necessarily focusing on my own. I didn't have necessarily any training, in all of this. It was just something I was very, very passionate about. And again, I had very unique opportunities where I was able to create and lead teams of people, coming right out of school, all the way up to developing, creating education enablement programs for supply chain department. And again, really fantastic opportunities that led me, I had a fantastic leadership that asked me one day, well, what are you going to do with this? Where do you see yourself going? Have you ever thought about certification? I thought, I never knew you could be certified in coaching. Let me look into that. And I did. And a 2-year journey of, courses and training, and now certified coach, and opened up my own business.
Good for you. I'm just going to ask there, Brooke, obviously working in a large GPO for many years and that background, and then all of a sudden now you've jumped into your own company, your own firm, if you will. What's that journey been like? How difficult has it been for you?
I have always been one to say that, I've experienced a lot of personal and professional growth throughout my career, and very grateful for the folks that have supported me and have been around me to provide guidance and coaching. But I will say that starting my own business and the last, 4 months of that has been actually most impactful in my life. I have grown more in those 4 months than probably my entire career because of the things I've had to do to get outside of my comfort zone. I'm actually in a position now where I'm selling myself, my own brand versus, say, somebody else's. So it has been extremely eye-opening, and I have to continually coach myself, right? I have a lot of coaches myself to ensure that my mindset stays in the right place and that I continue on the journey and path that I'm supposed to be on.
Congrats.
Thank you.
We see all the time people come into careers, and you kind of explain this even, in your own experience, where they don't necessarily get training, not even just on the job, but especially around management and leadership skills. But I also think it's really important to make a differentiation here before we even move on in the conversation, which is there is a big difference between management and leadership skills. And I think a lot of times, even if you get some management training, you don't necessarily get leadership training. So, Brooke, can you talk about the distinct differences between management experience or training and leadership skills and development?
Sure. So when I think of the difference between, say, a manager and a leader, a manager is very focused on managing the tasks of, what needs to be done to perform as a team and as an individual. It really is driven towards that, whatever KPIs potentially, right? But when you look at a leader is focused on how can we utilize, leverage, cultivate the skills that we have on this team, bring out the best of the people on this team so that we can truly take this team and organization to the next level. I like to refer to it as really servant leadership, right? When a leader makes the decision to focus more on the people that are on the team versus themselves. Sometimes that means giving up their work, right? That takes a lot of trust. And it takes a lot of focus and dedication and time to the individuals on the team to ensure that they have the tools and the resources they have to be successful, but they also are motivated to be the best they absolutely can be.
No, Brooke, appreciate that. And I really like the differentiation between the leadership and the management skills. And it kind of brings into a topic that I think we're all dealing with right now in supply chain is this workforce shortage issue and trying to get people on board and really being creative. And I think that ties into that leadership piece that you're talking about. Maybe share with our listeners that are listening to Power Supply and moving forward, what are some things you would maybe want to discuss that would help us with this workforce shortage on the leadership and moving forward? So please share your insight.
Sure. So it's been an interesting time. And, I like to think of, the last couple years. Yes, there were some trying times for everyone, but what is the gift that we can see from what we've experienced? And I think a lot of folks are going through that transition. themselves, right? How can I find more connectedness and purpose in my life based on the experiences that I've had? They haven't been so great potentially. And how can I shape my life into what it's meant to be and take some time to figure that out? And then find an organization that I connect with and is a good match, right, to what I'm looking for. Like what is my purpose? What am I really good at? How can I be creative? I mean, we're finding all these innovations coming out of this time because people are making the time to be innovative and creative. It's very interesting.
I really like where you're going with this. It's like a reset. And I think about transformation and reset and people really identifying what they really want to do and who they want to work for, whether it's a GPO or it's going out on your own and doing your own piece as you've done, Brooke. But are we recruiting different? I mean, with what's gone on, our normal day-to-day recruiting efforts to get some of these shorties and these people to come work for us when they have options, are we changing our recruiting efforts? Are we resetting those?
Well, I can't speak for any particular organization myself, but I would say that I think, yes, it makes sense to do that. I think we need to look at the way that we are looking for individuals and how we are interviewing individuals, and then in turn, how we hire and onboard individuals. Because, we learned from the most recent MIT Sloan research that came out about the Great Resignation, there's so many different things about culture, unethical cultures, disrespect, cutthroat cultures. That is the reason why people are leaving organizations. I also believe it's because they're not connected to the work, right? So you must be able, first and foremost, to find the people based on the strength of the job that's needed. But I also believe that on the other hand, the people that are looking for positions need to ensure that they are doing the same research and they are putting the same due diligence into their own focus and matchmaking of the organization based on their own strengths and skill sets as well. So yes, I do believe that the recruiting process does need to change. I think we need to understand people a little bit more, and people honestly I feel need to understand themselves a little bit more as well.
Let me kind of pile onto that kind of train of thought there a little bit. And I don't know if this is true or not. I'm kind of asking here. I do know like some of the large IT companies outside of healthcare, be it the Microsoft or Salesforce or whoever it is, they do a lot of very, very detailed training, mentoring, leadership, coaching is part of the package to get and recruit people. But I feel like, at least I don't know about it, but it seems like we're having trouble filling some of these positions inside of healthcare, supply chain specifically here. It seems like there ought to be more coaching, more development as part of the curriculum, if you will. And have you seen that? I would think you'd probably endorse that.
Yes. I would say that I still run into organizations and individuals that do not know what coaching is, right? I think we're an ever evolving trade, I guess you could say, is we're getting our name out there more and more. And I think people even today think of coach, they think of sports, which is very interesting. So I find myself explaining it a lot. But what I will say is that there's a lot of statistics out there that actually tie organizational performance to coaching and the level of coaching that an organization has invested in their employees, which is so interesting. And the great thing about coaching is that it gives an individualized perspective, opportunity and tools that maybe a traditional manager in the workforce setting doesn't have in their tool belt.
Yeah, because I deal with a lot on the hospital CEO, the C-suite as well. And they're in many cases, I think they do have kind of a mentoring program set up, if you will, right? Like the COO has, a young VP or a young director kind of that they're interfacing with on, maybe it's a weekly, monthly basis. But I don't see it at other areas. And I'd be curious. I mean, that's where I feel like we might need this more and more. And, I think coaching, to your point, the people I've talked to and I know about a little bit about this market, if you will, this area, I'm amazed about growth that people have when they're given a few skills, a few talents, and and a push, and create self-awareness too, I think.
Absolutely. And what you said just there is really key. Self-awareness, bringing out an individual's strengths and helping them understand them and be able to leverage them, but then maybe also their blind spots, right, is key. And giving them space, a trusted, confidential space to be transparent and share things that maybe they don't feel comfortable sharing in the workforce with, say, a manager or a leader, where things will come out that maybe have never come out before. And it is really that partnership between the coach and that employee about, how do we get through this together? How do we help you move forward so that you can perform in this role? How do you get past that fear? How do you get past that imposter? What does that look like? Like I said before, a lot of times we don't necessarily want our managers in the workforce setting to actually pull those tools out. And sometimes they are not equipped to pull that tool out to help somebody move through, say, a fear or an imposter to be their best.
I have some questions that I want to piggyback off of what you were talking about in terms of what, maybe new professionals are looking for. And I want to tie it really directly to supply chain too in a second. But when you say imposter, can you define what you mean by the imposter? I mean, I think we all have an assumption of what that means, but we're bringing different experiences to the table. And I want you to kind of be like, Hays is the imposter.
Well, we know Hays is the imposter.
Yes, Brooke, yes.
Oh, wait. I'm sorry, we're having technical difficulties. We're going to have to stop this.
I'm good on my end.
All right. First, Justin, hat tip to you, but Brooke, even a better comment there.
Very nice. Very nice.
You guys are fun. Okay, so that's a loaded question at the end of the day. So an imposter can be an inner critic. It's that inner voice that's telling us that we can't do something, right? That inner judge that is constantly saying, you're not good enough. You don't have the skills. You don't have a voice here. Don't speak up. There's a fantastic program that I'm going through right now called Positive Intelligence, where it actually does talk more about the judge, the hyperachiever, the hypervigilant, the stickler that you have inside you. It gives us the ability to identify those in individuals and to provide them tools to lower that voice without being therapy, and to move forward and to truly work on being the best they can in that fashion. So that's I'm hoping that answers your question, but it is really truly what holds us back most of the time.
Yeah, it's your undermining alter ego in a way. Yeah. All right, so let's talk about not just the new guard and what they're looking for as they come into the industry, but also, and especially supply chain. There's an old guard in supply chain too. And I feel like not necessarily within every organization, but I think just culturally, the value systems of what some of the more tenured supply chain professionals look for, want from their careers, not just because they're at a different stage in their career, but literally what they want from an organization or how their values line up versus how the new guard does. I feel like that creates this big value divide, and it really does put an organization in kind of a compromising position, because how do they satisfy two widely different value systems within the same workforce and try to acknowledge that new workforce is looking for something different, and get the old guard that might be in that mentorship role to sort of acknowledge that and completely abandon, and what it would feel like for, I think, a lot of people, their value system to accommodate this new value system. I know that that's at the heart of coaching, especially leaders, and getting through that. So I really want to, bite off on that topic and get your insight, especially if you could tie it directly to supply chain.
Sure. When you think about supply chain in the context that I know it as well, personally and professionally, it's really important to be in touch with what's going on in the world, right? We've had a lot of issues come up with supply chain over the last several years. So it is important to, be educated in that space and to have the knowledge, the motivation to learn more about how an individual can truly impact that space as a supply chain professional. However, I do think a missing piece there and a missing focus is more on, how individuals that come into a supply chain professional world, how do they stay connected? How do they focus on, how do we make sure that they're focused on their values and their strengths and the purpose that they have and the connectedness to the organization, while at the same time being innovative, resilient, collaborative, having a global perspective about supply chain, and then, also the confidence to have that voice, right? Because that voice to explain and communicate innovative ideas is so important in supply chain right now, right? So there needs to be that trust needs to be formed between leadership and those professionals joining organizations, where we really are focusing a lot on soft skills, right, as well as the hard skills, the soft skills, and understanding what's meaningful to an individual as they join the workforce. Because it is really important to be able to listen and to hear what somebody's saying in terms of what they need, and then to develop that trust, but that to turn around and say, okay, individually, this is what I see you need in terms of education and training, but how we can actually bring out what the strengths are that you have. And a leader to actually see that in individual, right? There needs to be that open communication, listening, trust, and open-mindedness, as well as the willingness to seek out alternative development solutions outside of traditional training, courses, leadership programs, and even perhaps this is where coaching can have a greater impact and retain motivated employees. And not only be impactful for the new guard, but the old guard as well, because the old guard can too benefit from coaching, and especially on how to navigate the new guard.
That's so right on, Brooke. And you said a lot of key words there, and I was taking a few notes. Stay connected, focused, leadership, having the mindset to move forward. And I keep coming back to this word of discipline. And it's almost like motivation is such a great word, but if you don't have the discipline to move forward as a leader, you almost lose that whole umbrella. And I think, all of us have experienced some type of coaching, and you're like, do I need that coaching? Do I want that coaching? Do I need that coaching? I've got it figured out. And I really want you to talk to our listeners of what's the hesitancy? Why do people not want coaching or don't take the coaching on? I found it was one of the best things I ever had from an executive leadership standpoint. It was new to me. It was a planned coaching weekly. And I tell you what, challenged me, held me to discipline, moved me forward. It was great leadership. So speak to that, maybe why people are a little hesitant and really why they should be open to it. So please, Brooke.
Yeah, so it's interesting because, some folks are not sure if they can trust a coach, right? And what will be shared back to an organization, what that will look like. And sometimes they're just not ready. And that's okay. There are some folks that are not ready. If you think about an individual going through the process, the stages of change, it really is important that somebody is really, truly ready for that experience. And if they're not, then okay. So what happens then, right? Like, what does that look like for this individual? Back to your question about the hesitancy. I do think that there are some folks that have had coaches that didn't have the best experience. Right? Perhaps the individual didn't understand the organization, the structure, the politics, or just were not equipped with the tools that individual needed, perhaps, right? I do think that there's also this trend, it feels like a trend that coaches are being employed and hired to work with individuals. And the question is like, can we really truly tie performance with the coach's experience, right? The coach experience. But I would say that behavior takes more than 3 months. It takes more than 3 months for change to happen. And I would say that there's also a lack of investment sometimes at the lower level in organizations where coaches don't want to maybe put the money towards the emerging leaders yet. Maybe they want to focus on the ones that are leaders today. Maybe that's a strategy on their part. And maybe they have internal mentors that they rely on as well, right? The internal mentors are providing value to the individuals, and maybe they don't see that or understand how coaching would provide additional value. And in reality, coaches are trained to do things differently and have the tools in their tool belt that managers or mentors within an organization may not have.
I'll throw this out there, Brooke. There's, I won't name him, I'll blast him out here, but he actually is a very, very, significant player in healthcare supply chain. And he tells me, and I think he's told others, he hired a coach, an executive coach, and he says it literally changed his entire life. Said he's a better manager, better family, husband, all those things. And he makes it really well known to all the people that he works with and for that, you should do this. And so I feel like part of it is he's very secure in his own skin. And I feel like some folks, perhaps with insecurities or whatnot, might be hesitant to do that, right? And they're scared of, because they don't want to be told something, you're not very good at this or that. Meanwhile, that's what your role is, to try to help fortify those weaknesses, perhaps.
Absolutely. And they also may look at it as, oh, this is more time that I need to take out of, my already busy schedule to focus on another thing, myself. They may not see and be able to find the value in that right away.
Yeah, which is crazy, because obviously the better we are personally, the better employees we are, the better we are handling meetings, handling people, all those good things. So,
and you think about it too, it's an extra layer of accountability, because when you start working with a coach, oftentimes there is a performance or progress report or summary that comes from it. And again, that goes back to, well, this is an additional thing that I have to do on what I'm doing today. How is this going to look good upon me versus potentially bad? Is this truly in good light, or is there another reason for this, right? And that's where I think there's great opportunity for how the coaching arrangement is set up, because oftentimes it's not because of bad performance. It's really truly to support the individual and to help them continue on their leadership journey, which is such a fantastic way to recognize someone in an organization.
And keeping them from going someplace else and bringing those skills. Mm-hmm. So yeah, retention is huge. So
I'm going to go a little bit away from the outline for this last question, and then I'll leave you a spot to kind of add anything that we missed, because I know, we talked about putting best practices in here, and there's lots of best practices that you just woven into the conversation. But if you think of one that we missed or whatever, we can make sure that you get a chance to add that. So I want to talk about, being coachable, because you can put all kinds of, coaching into practice, and that could be a great thing. And there's lots of positives from it, because it's focused on the individual. It's private. They don't necessarily have to worry about getting in trouble with their manager, who may be a mentor that's coaching them. And I think all of those things are great. But if an individual is not coachable, they think they know everything or they can do everything on their own. And maybe that's one of the imposters that shows up to play. But can you talk about traits of individuals that are coachable that would maximize this opportunity that might be given to them?
Sure, absolutely. So I think some traits of some coachable individuals would be, they're willing to be vulnerable, right? And they're willing to listen to maybe some hard truths from an outside perspective. And they're willing to put in the work for themselves, right? And really understanding maybe where the issues are coming from. So they're willing to be self-aware. They're willing to be vulnerable. They're open-minded, right? They're open to various perspectives, and even one that comes from somewhere it doesn't, they don't know them, right? It's somebody completely new to their life. they're willing to change and maybe even excited to change, right? We see a lot of people coming to coaches individually, not even within an organization, because they want to improve, they want to change. And motivation is key. They're motivated. They want to improve. Maybe they see the potential in themselves and they don't know how to pull it out. So they're seeking help. They're seeking that help from an outside person, to be able to realize that. Those are the things that come to mind right now around, the
Let's flip
various
it.
Okay, sure.
If you're going to be a coach, and maybe this ties to why you might look for somebody as an organization, somebody that's certified, who's had the training, who isn't invested in the day-to-day, what are some key components and personality types of successful coaches? Because there's also people that I think are more than willing to give their time and their knowledge and their experience to, the newer talent in their industry or their field. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're a good coach. They could be an enabler. There's all kinds of other things that, as you said, the accountability and all of that could get in the way. So what are some qualities that are really critical to making somebody a successful coach?
Great question. I'm going to first and foremost say that coaches approach their businesses all different ways, right? So one coach may be a great fit for an organization where it may not be a fit for the next one, right? And that really does go into, personality, like you said. And I do think that's why, unfortunately, coaching is not regulated today. But there are a lot of accredited organizations in the United States that train coaches and have, rigorous programs for coaches to go through to obtain the skills to be successful coaches. And so first and foremost, I would say that a coach should be a good listener, somebody that can truly sit back and hear, not just listen, but really hear what someone is saying. Give them the time, to divulge, kind of what their experience is. And somebody who is curious, very curious, and is willing to continue to ask those questions that are going to help that individual finally get to that space. That's like an aha moment, right? It gives that person more insight and perspective than they could potentially get on their own. And maybe with another individual that's not a coach. Somebody who is supportive and someone who's patient and a great communicator and who is, I would say, organized. Organization is really important when it comes to coaching, especially if you're coaching multiple individuals, right? You want to be able to be prepared for your coaching sessions. You want to be able to have various tools in your tool belt that you can pull out when a certain situation comes up, to be able to walk that person through that situation in various ways and really providing that really important support system for them. But somebody that also has, a business mindset that can work with organizations and ask the right questions so that they can help that organization at the end of the day get to whatever final, either it be a product, a performance, an end goal with that individual, and that will be both beneficial for the individual and the organization.
So aligning the coaching strategy and objectives with the organizational's
absolutely
objectives and strategy.
Absolutely. That is, to me, it's a foundation in starting a coaching or engagement with an organization.
Oh, that's so interesting. So the approach might be different if somebody came to you as a coach and wanted to work one-on-one versus the organization comes to you and says, there's a couple of people I want you to be working with inside of our organization.
Absolutely. Well, every engagement is a little different depending on what the organization's or individuals' goals are and how they want to engage a coach. It could be a little bit more loose. In some cases, it's going to be much more entailed and detailed.
Brooke, this was really insightful. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to be focused on coaching. And at the end of the day, as we talked about very early on with the workforce shortages, even if you were to expect and ask and cultivate a culture of mentorship, the stress on the system now in terms of just not having enough people to get the job done on a day-to-day, not to mention all the back orders, the variability of meeting the demand in terms of supply. It's really hit an unprecedented state of affairs. And so I think those stressors on the system limit the time availability for mentorship. But I think you did also a really nice job of differentiating between, management, mentorship, and coaching. All three are very different components of building an organizational culture that fosters leadership and sustainability in that leadership platform. So I just want to thank you so much for coming on the show. Very inspiring episode.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And I will say, just based on what you just said, when it comes to not taking the time or having the time to invest in mentorship or coaching, whatever it may be, at the end of the day, a lot of the times when somebody does invest in the coaching system, what an individual or individuals get out of that engagement actually helps them free their time up, right? Because there's discussions about productivity, efficiency, collaboration, you name it. So a lot of times people will come out on the better end, not knowing that that's really where they were going to end up when they invested in coaching. But really, truly, that is one of the great opportunities that you can foresee and realize from coaching.
Maximizing your resources.
Absolutely.
That was Brooke Elliott, founder and certified coach at Be Complete Coaching and Consulting LLC in Hays. I really think that at the very end, we kind of teased out probably the most important theme, which is maximizing your resources. And as an organization, that means the people that you have on the team. And as an individual, it means maximizing the resources that you have available, like your time and the tools that you have at your disposal. And I think coaching is one way to make not only yourself be accountable as an individual and as an organization, but also one of the ways that you maximize the resources, which really ties back to the workforce component. Like right now, everybody's trying to figure out how to do more with less. And while coaching may be an investment up front, I think Brooke made a pretty good point and a pretty good case, for how you can get more out of those resources by making a small investment in coaching.
Well, I echo the same thing because, we have issues with workforce management, trying to get enough people there, quality people there. And if you don't coach them, if you don't train them, they're going to leave. They're going to go someplace else. They won't be fulfilled and they just won't be good at what they do. And I think she clearly made the case. You'd have to agree that having good coaching, good mentoring in place and a program in place certainly helps that. So yes, she was fantastic. I really enjoyed our conversation. We could have gone much longer.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this week's show. But as a reminder, you can help support Power Supply by subscribing on Apple, Amazon, or Google Podcasts. You can also find us. We're on Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or even on your favorite podcast application. You just got to search for Power Supply. But the easiest way to engage with us and subscribe to the podcast is to download our smartphone app for iPhone and Android. We'd love it if you gave us a rating and a review while you're there downloading. And we've also got bonus content for you. Just look for the gift box icon for the episode. And finally, if you have a question or a recommendation for a guest on the show, just send an email to info@powersupplymedia.net. On behalf of Garry, Hays, and myself, thank you for listening to this week's episode of Power Supply.